Have you ever paused, just for a moment, and wondered whether the picture of the solar system living quietly in your mind is telling you the truth, or whether it is, well, a comforting illusion shaped by textbooks and tidy diagrams you first saw as a child? You know, those images where planets sit neatly spaced like ornaments on a shelf, suggesting a sense of closeness, of familiarity, of scale that feels almost human. But what if that picture is profoundly misleading? What if the solar system, which feels so vast when we speak of millions of kilometers, is in fact astonishingly small, almost vanishingly so, when placed gently into the wider canvas of the universe? And that's the thing, you see. Our brains evolved to navigate forests, plains, and coastlines, not the silent gulfs between stars. We are exquisitely tuned to judge the distance between footsteps, the arc of a thrown stone, the time it takes the sun to cross the sky. Yet when confronted with cosmic distances, our intuition begins to unravel. Numbers lose their meaning. A billion becomes just another word. So perhaps the real question is not how big the solar system is in kilometers, but where it truly sits when we shrink the universe down to a scale our minds can hold. If the cosmos were reduced to something as familiar as a map you could unfold on a table late at night, where would our home appear? Would it be a city, a grain of sand, or something even smaller? And when you realize just how much empty space surrounds everything you've ever known, it invites a quiet, humbling thought, not of insignificance, I suppose, but of perspective. Because understanding our true size is really about understanding our place. Before we go on, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. My aim here is simple: to help you drift off to sleep while exploring the wonders of science. Where are you on the map? Let me know where you are in the world and what time it is in the comments. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from all around the world. So let's continue. Our difficulty begins quietly, almost invisibly, in the way the human mind was shaped. You see, we did not evolve to comprehend the universe. We evolved to survive an afternoon, to find shelter before nightfall, to judge whether that shadow in the grass was the wind or something with teeth. And that's the thing. Our brains are masterpieces of efficiency at the scale of hands, faces, footsteps, and familiar horizons. They are exquisitely tuned instruments for a narrow band of reality. And outside that band, well, they begin to struggle, to improvise, to guess. When we talk about the size of the solar system, we often feel a sense of understanding, a quiet confidence that comes from repeating words like millions and billions. But those words are not experiences. They are symbols, and symbols alone cannot carry the weight of cosmic distance. Think about how you truly understand space in your everyday life. You know the distance from your bed to the door without measuring it. You can sense how far away a voice is by its softness. You can catch a ball because your brain can predict its arc with astonishing precision. This is embodied knowledge, knowledge rooted in muscle memory and survival. But now imagine trying to feel the distance from Earth to the Sun in the same way. Not calculate it, not recite it, but feel it. Let it settle into your bones. You can't. Not really. The number is too large to anchor itself to anything familiar. It floats, untethered, like a word spoken in a language you do not quite speak. And this is not a failure of intelligence. It's a consequence of evolution. For hundreds of thousands of years, there was no advantage in grasping astronomical scales. Knowing the exact size of the solar system would not help you gather food or raise children or avoid danger. So the brain never developed the tools for it. Instead, it developed shortcuts, heuristics, comparisons. We reduce the unfamiliar to the familiar. We imagine planets as beads on a string, stars as lights on a ceiling, galaxies as swirling pinwheels no bigger than a coin held at arm's length. These images are comforting. They give us a sense of mastery, but they are also profoundly misleading. Consider how we teach children about space. We draw diagrams where everything fits neatly on a page. The sun is a large circle. The planets are smaller circles, evenly spaced, politely orbiting in clear, uncluttered paths. Nothing is wrong with these images. Not exactly. They are useful. They are necessary. But over time, they quietly train the mind to believe that the solar system is a compact thing, a system where objects are relatively close, where movement feels intuitive, where travel seems merely difficult rather than deeply improbable. And once that belief takes hold, it becomes very hard to shake. Numbers, of course, are meant to rescue us here. We are told that Earth is about 150 million kilometers from the Sun, that Jupiter is several times farther out, that light takes minutes to reach us. But numbers without context do something strange to the mind. They lose texture. 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000, they begin to blur together. Psychologists have long known that humans do not perceive numbers linearly. Each additional zero adds magnitude but not meaning. Beyond a certain point, large numbers collapse into the same vague category of very big. And that's where the universe hides from us, in that fog of abstraction. You might notice this effect in other parts of life. We hear about populations in the millions and tragedies involving numbers too large to picture individual lives. Our emotional response flattens, not because we do not care, but because our minds cannot scale compassion infinitely. The same thing happens with space. When distances grow too large, our sense of awe paradoxically diminishes. The universe becomes distant not just physically, but psychologically. It turns into data. So we lean on metaphor. We compare. We say if the Earth were the size of a grain of sand, the sun would be a marble across the room. These metaphors help, but only briefly. Because even then, the room itself is not large enough. We must imagine corridors, fields, cities, continents. The scale keeps escaping us. Each comparison solves one problem while revealing another. And perhaps that endless slipping away is the point. Perhaps the universe resists being fully grasped because we are not meant to dominate it conceptually. We are meant to approach it humbly, step by step. There is another limitation, more subtle, and I suppose more philosophical. Our brains are wired to focus on objects rather than emptiness. We notice things. We name them. We build stories around them. But in the universe, emptiness is the rule, not the exception. Most of the solar system is not planets or sunlight or motion. It is silence. It is vacuum. It is nothing happening over unimaginably large distances. And nothing is very hard for the brain to hold on to. There is no texture to it, no edge, no color. So we compress it. We squeeze space until objects feel closer together than they truly are. We edit out the void. This is why science fiction often feels crowded. Spaceships jump from planet to planet as if hopping between train stations. Stars pass by the windows in neat, cinematic streaks. Even when stories try to be realistic, the demands of narrative pull everything closer together. Because a story about waiting, about traveling through emptiness for years without change, is deeply unsettling. It confronts us with our own smallness and patience, and we are not very comfortable with either. And yet, when we slow down, when we allow ourselves to sit with that discomfort, something interesting happens. The emptiness begins to feel less like a lack and more like a presence. The vast distances are no longer obstacles but features. They become part of the story of why the universe is the way it is. The long separations between planets, the enormous gulfs between stars. They allow systems to remain stable. They give time for complexity to emerge. They make life rare and therefore precious. Still, the brain resists. It keeps pulling us back to the familiar. It insists on shrinking the universe to a size it can tolerate. And that's why, when we speak about scale, we must be gentle with ourselves. Understanding does not come all at once. It comes in layers. First, we accept that our intuition is unreliable. Then, we learn to borrow intuition from analogy and model. And finally, perhaps, we reach a place where we no longer need to fully imagine the scale to respect it. You might notice how this mirrors other human experiences. Time, for example. We understand seconds and minutes intimately. We feel hours stretch and contract depending on emotion. But geological time, evolutionary time, cosmological, time, these are just as elusive as cosmic distance. We speak of them, we measure them, but we do not feel them. And yet they shape everything we are. Space and time, distance and duration, they share this quality of being real but resistant to intuition. So when we say the solar system is large, we are speaking from within a narrow window of perception. Large compared to a city, large compared to a lifetime, but not large in the language the universe speaks. In that language, size is relational. It only has meaning when placed alongside something else. And that is where our journey must go next. Not deeper into numbers, but into relationships, into comparisons that stretch not just the intellect, but the imagination. Because once we begin to separate size from distance, once we start to notice that what feels big is often mostly empty, a new picture begins to form. The solar system stops looking like a collection of objects and starts to resemble a vast, sparse landscape, more like an ocean than a machine. And when you start to see it that way, you are ready to ask a different kind of question. Not how big the solar system is, but what it really means to call something big in a universe where emptiness does most of the talking. And so, once we accept that our intuition falters, that our minds compress and smooth and simplify the universe into something survivable, we are left with a quieter but far more interesting task. We must ask what we even mean when we say something is big. Because in everyday life, size feels straightforward. A house is bigger than a room. A mountain is bigger than a hill. You can walk around an object, measure it, touch its edges. Size feels like a property of the thing itself. But out there, beyond the atmosphere, size behaves very differently. It becomes slippery, relational, almost philosophical. And that's the thing, you see. In the universe, size is rarely about the object. It is about the space around it. When we picture the solar system, we often imagine it as a structure, something like a clockwork mechanism, solid and coherent, with planets neatly arranged around a dominant center. But that picture hides an important truth. The planets are not the solar system in the way bricks are a house. They are accents in a vast emptiness. Flecks of matter adrift in an ocean whose defining feature is not what is in it, but how little there is. If you were to remove the sun and the planets and everything visible, the solar system would still be there, defined not by mass, but by distance, by the invisible gravitational reach that stretches far beyond what the eye can see. This is where our language begins to betray us. We say the sun is large, and it is, unimaginably so compared to Earth. But the space between the sun and the planets is larger still, not in mass, not in energy, but in sheer volume. And volume is something the brain struggles to feel when it is empty. A full room feels bigger than an empty field, even if the field is far larger. Presence tricks us. Absence slips past unnoticed. In the universe, absence dominates. Most of what exists between planets is not light or dust or gas in any meaningful sense. It is vacuum, stretched thin, quieter than anything we experience on Earth. Even the best vacuums we can create in laboratories are crowded compared to interplanetary space. And yet, when we talk about the solar system, we tend to speak as though the planets define its size, as though their orbits trace the edges of a thing. In reality, those orbits are like a few grains of sand scattered across a vast beach, barely hinting at its true extent. There is a subtle but profound distinction here between size and separation. An object can be large but isolated. Another can be small, but deeply embedded in a dense environment. On Earth, these differences blur because matter is abundant. Everything touches or nearly touches something else. Space is filled with air, with sound, with motion. But in the solar system, distance overwhelms dimension. A planet can be enormous and still be effectively alone. And when you start to think this way, the solar system begins to feel less like a collection of things and more like a region, a domain, a volume of influence carved out by gravity, where the sun's pull gently governs the motion of objects across staggering distances. The sun is not sitting at the center of a compact family of worlds. It is anchoring a vast, mostly empty territory, one where the planets are rare interruptions in a long, quiet expanse. This reframing changes how we interpret familiar facts. When we say Earth orbits the Sun, we imagine closeness, a kind of cosmic intimacy. But Earth is not nestled against the Sun. It is separated from it by a gulf so wide that light itself takes time to cross it. And even that gulf is small compared to the distances farther out. The outer planets drift through regions of space so sparse that if you were to travel there, you would feel no sense of arrival. There would be no boundary to cross, no visible marker to announce that you had entered something new. Perhaps a better metaphor is the ocean, not the surface, where ships cluster and waves interact, but the deep ocean, where vast volumes of water stretch in silence, broken only occasionally by life. In that ocean, size is not about the fish or the whales. It is about the water itself. The solar system is like that, an immense, mostly empty medium with a few luminous bodies moving through it, tracing paths that help us sense the scale but never fully reveal it. And this is why diagrams fail us. They must choose between accuracy and clarity almost always wins. To show all the planets on one page, distances must be compressed beyond recognition. The result is an image that communicates relationships but distorts reality. It teaches us who orbits whom, but not how far apart those relationships truly are. Over time, these distortions accumulate in the mind, quietly reinforcing the idea that the solar system is crowded, busy, tightly knit. In truth, the solar system is defined less by what it contains than by what it lacks. The empty space between planets is not wasted or incidental. It is fundamental. It shapes orbital stability. It allows long periods of calm. It makes collisions rare and catastrophic when they do occur. Without that emptiness, the solar system would be violent, unstable, and short-lived. The quiet distances are what make longevity possible. There is something deeply humbling in this realization. We tend to measure importance by presence. We value what is visible, tangible, dense. But the universe seems to value space itself. It builds complexity not by packing matter tightly together, but by spreading it thin, allowing interactions to unfold slowly over immense scales. Life, consciousness, even thought, emerge not from abundance alone, but from balance, from room to breathe. And I suppose this is where the emotional weight of scale begins to settle in. When you realize that the solar system is not a solid structure but a vast hollow, it changes how you feel about your place within it. Earth is not floating among neighbors. It is traveling through a profound solitude, accompanied by distant companions it will never meet. And yet, within that solitude, something extraordinary has happened. Matter has learned to look back at the space that surrounds it. This perspective also prepares us for a more honest conversation about scale. Because if we continue to think of size as something intrinsic to objects, we will keep misunderstanding the universe. We will keep asking the wrong questions. How big is the Sun? How big is Jupiter? These are useful questions, but incomplete ones. The more revealing question is how far apart things are, and how much space exists for every bit of matter we can point to. Once you begin to think in terms of separation rather than size, familiar objects start to feel strange again. The planets become isolated outposts rather than neighbors. The solar system becomes less like a machine and more like a landscape. A place you could get lost in, not because it is complicated, but because it is so vast and so empty that direction itself loses meaning. And that's the quiet shift happening here. We are redefining size not as bulk, but as context. Not as mass, but as scale relative to emptiness. The solar system is large not because its objects are big, but because the distances between them are enormous. It is not a thing you can hold in your mind as a single image. It is something you must travel through, slowly, patiently, letting the emptiness itself become part of the understanding. And once you accept that, once you allow the space between planets to matter more than the planets themselves, you are ready for the next step. Because now, the question is no longer abstract. It becomes almost playful. What if we could shrink this vast, hollow region down to a size we could walk across? What if we could turn astronomical distances into something measured in footsteps and glances? Only then can we begin to see just how misleading our usual pictures have been, and how surprisingly close and yet how profoundly far everything really is. Only now, with that new way of seeing quietly settling in, can we do something that at first sounds almost childish, but is in fact profoundly revealing. We can play a game of scale, not with numbers written on a page, but with imagination carefully tethered to reality. Because if the universe refuses to fit neatly inside our minds, perhaps the mind can meet it halfway. Perhaps we can shrink the solar system down, gently, patiently, until it becomes something we can walk through, something we can feel with our bodies, rather than calculate with symbols. So, well, let us begin with an act of deliberate make-believe, but disciplined make-believe, the kind scientists rely on every day. Imagine the sun reduced not to a blazing sphere of plasma, but to something modest, something familiar. Let it be a ball, about the size of a small orange, warm in your hand, glowing softly, but not blindingly. Already something curious happens. The sun, which dominates every diagram and every story, suddenly feels approachable. It fits within the span of your fingers. You could place it on a table and walk away without fear. Now comes the part our intuition never quite expects. If the sun were that small, where would Earth be? Most people instinctively place it nearby, a few steps away, across the room perhaps, because textbooks have trained us to see the planets as clustered companions. But the truth, you see, is far less comfortable and far more beautiful. At this scale, Earth would be a tiny grain, smaller than a peppercorn, and it would not be near the sun at all. It would be many meters away, not close enough to reach out to, not close enough to feel connected. You would have to walk, deliberately, across open space to reach it. And, as you make that walk in your mind, something shifts. The distance begins to register not as a number, but as time. Time spent walking, time spent waiting. Empty space passing slowly by with nothing to mark your progress. No signposts, no gradual transition, just absence. And when you finally arrive at that tiny grain representing Earth, it feels almost lonely, not because it is small, but because of how isolated it is. Now consider Mercury and Venus. They too are grains, scattered along the path between Earth and the Sun, but not in a neat row. They are far apart, separated by stretches of nothing so long they begin to feel excessive. This is where our usual images quietly collapse. The planets are not strung together like beads. They are isolated islands in a vast sea of emptiness. The sea is the main feature. The islands are punctuation. What surprises most people is not how far away the outer planets are, but how close the inner ones appear in drawings. In reality, even the so-called neighboring planets are profoundly distant. If you stood by the sun and tried to point to Earth, you would not gesture vaguely nearby. You would indicate a location far across an open expanse. And once you begin to accept that, the solar system stops feeling like a system at all, at least in the mechanical sense. It begins to feel more like geography. Continue walking outward in this imagined landscape. Mars comes into view, but not quickly. It arrives after a long, quiet stretch. And between Earth and Mars, there is nothing. No debris field, no glowing lanes, just space, thin and silent. Science fiction has trained us to expect activity there, traffic, movement. But the reality is closer to a desert, where even the wind has forgotten to blow. Then come the gas giants. In diagrams, they dominate the scene. Huge, colorful, commanding. But at this scale, even they shrink to small objects, modest spheres encountered only after an almost tiring journey. Jupiter, the largest planet, is still dwarfed by the space surrounding it. You could walk around it in moments, but reaching it would take far longer. Saturn follows, beautiful but distant, its rings reduced to a whisper, almost an afterthought compared to the emptiness that cradles them. And this is where the trick our brains play on us becomes impossible to ignore. We tend to think that because planets are large compared to Earth, they must dominate the solar system. But dominance here is an illusion of illustration. In truth, the planets barely register against the scale of the space they inhabit. They are rare interruptions, fleeting encounters. Neptune, the outermost of the classical planets, would be so far away in this model that many people give up before reaching it. The walk becomes monotonous. The landscape refuses to change. And when Neptune finally appears, small and distant, it feels less like a destination and more like a quiet confirmation of how empty everything truly is. And yet, even here, we are not done. Because what we have shrunk so far is only the region most diagrams care to show. Beyond Neptune lies more emptiness, and then more still. Objects become fewer. Distances stretch further. The solar system does not end where the pictures usually stop. It fades gradually, thinning out, becoming less crowded, less eventful, until boundaries lose meaning altogether. What this exercise reveals is not just scale, but distortion. Almost every image you have ever seen of the solar system is wrong in one crucial way. Not wrong in fact, but wrong in feeling. Distances are compressed beyond recognition. Planets are enlarged to be visible. Space is sacrificed for clarity. And over time, these compromises teach us a false lesson. They teach us that the solar system is dense, busy, compact. In reality, it is sparse, slow, and overwhelmingly empty. And that emptiness is not a flaw in the universe. It is a feature. It is what allows stability. It is what prevents chaos. It is what gives planets time to settle into long, graceful orbits that last billions of years. Without that space, everything would collide. Nothing would endure. There is something deeply human in how this realization lands. We often equate emptiness with absence, with lack, with something missing. But in the solar system, emptiness is what makes everything else possible. It is the silence that allows a melody to exist. The pause that gives meaning to sound, the darkness that lets stars be seen. As you imagine standing in this scaled-down solar system, perhaps late at night, perhaps alone, you begin to feel not overwhelmed but strangely calm. The distances are honest. They do not rush you. They do not demand attention. They simply are. And within that vastness, the tiny dot representing Earth takes on a new significance. Not because it is large or central, but because it is rare, because something is happening there that is happening almost nowhere else we know. And that's the quiet emotional turn. Seeing the solar system this way does not make us feel insignificant in a dismissive sense. It makes us feel improbable, fragile, precious. Life is not nestled comfortably among neighbors. It is adrift in a vast, protective emptiness that both isolates and preserves it. Once you have walked this imagined landscape, once you have felt the distances rather than memorized them, you cannot quite return to the old pictures. They begin to look like caricatures. Useful, yes, but incomplete. The truth is slower, emptier, and far more profound. And now, with this scaled vision still lingering, another question begins to surface naturally. If the planets themselves are so isolated, so drowned in space, what is that space really like? What does it mean to travel through it? Because between every one of these tiny worlds lies not just distance, but a kind of absolute quiet that challenges everything we assume about movement, connection, and presence. And that is where the journey must drift next, into the long, silent stretches that fill almost all of the solar system, waiting patiently between one rare object and the next. And so the mind naturally drifts onward, carried by that realization of distance into the space itself. Because once you have accepted how far apart the planets truly are, the next question almost asks itself in a whisper. What is it like to travel through the vast regions that lie between them? What fills that enormous volume you have just walked across in your imagination? And the honest answer, the unsettling one, is almost nothing. When we say space between the planets, we often picture a place that is merely empty in a casual sense, like an abandoned room or a quiet road at night. But the emptiness between planets is of a different order entirely. It is not a place where things have been removed. It is a place where almost nothing ever was. The density of matter there is so low that our everyday words fail to describe it. Even the quietest vacuum we can create on Earth still teems with particles compared to interplanetary space. Out there, atoms drift so far apart that they rarely acknowledge one another at all. And, this is where imagination begins to wobble again. Because we are creatures of atmosphere. We live immersed in air, bathed in pressure, sound, motion. Even silence on Earth is full of vibration. The faint hum of distant movement, the whisper of wind, the subtle pressure of air against skin. In space, all of that falls away. Between Earth and Mars, there is no sound, not because it is quiet, but because sound itself cannot exist. There is no medium to carry it. Silence is not an absence of noise, it is the absence of possibility. This changes how we think about travel. Films and stories often portray journeys between planets as events, full of passing sights and dramatic movement. Stars streak by, nebulae glow. Space feels busy, but the reality is far more austere. If you were to travel from Earth toward Mars, there would be nothing to watch pass by, no sense of speed, no visual cue that you were moving at all. You would leave Earth behind, and then, for a very long time, there would be only blackness, punctuated by distant points of light that barely change. Even the sun, which dominates our sky, would slowly shrink, not dramatically, but almost imperceptibly. Day after day, it would remain stubbornly similar, refusing to give you the satisfaction of visible progress. Motion through space does not feel like motion on Earth. There is no friction, no wind in your face, no ground rushing beneath you. Progress is measured only by instruments, by patience, by trust in equations. And that's the thing, you see. The space between planets is not just empty. It is indifferent. It does not acknowledge your presence. You could travel for weeks, months, years, and nothing would change around you in any way your senses could detect. This indifference is deeply unsettling to a species accustomed to feedback. We expect the universe to respond when we move through it. In interplanetary space, it does not. There is also no infrastructure, no paths, no cosmic lanes etched into the void. Despite the language we sometimes use, there are no highways between worlds. Spacecraft do not follow visible routes. They fall, gently and continuously, guided by gravity and momentum, tracing invisible curves through nothingness. These paths exist only in mathematics. They are not marked. They are not reinforced. Miss them slightly, and you drift endlessly onward, unnoticed. This is why space travel is not merely difficult, but profoundly unnatural. Every journey must bring its own environment along. Air, heat, pressure. Life itself must be carried like a fragile bubble through a hostile emptiness. Between planets there is no shelter, no resource waiting to be harvested casually. Everything that sustains life must be planned, calculated, protected. The space itself offers nothing in return. And yet this emptiness is not chaotic. It is astonishingly calm. Once you leave the influence of planetary atmospheres, there are no storms, no turbulence, no weather in any meaningful sense. There is only slow, predictable motion. Orbits repeat. Paths endure. In that vast silence, stability reigns. The planets have circled the sun for billions of years through this emptiness, their motions untroubled by all but the faintest perturbations. This is why the emptiness occupies nearly all of the solar system. Not most of it. Nearly all of it. The combined volume of the planets is negligible compared to the space between them. If you were to remove every planet, every moon, every asteroid, the solar system would lose almost none of its size. Its defining characteristic would remain intact: distance. And there is something quietly poetic about that. We tend to think of the solar system as a collection of worlds, but it is more accurate to think of it as a vast, silent interval in which a few worlds happen to exist. The emptiness is not a backdrop. It is the main event. This realization also strips away a common misconception. We sometimes imagine that once we leave Earth, we are surrounded by hazards at every moment. Rocks, debris, invisible dangers lurking everywhere. In truth, collisions are extraordinarily rare. Space is not dangerous because it is crowded. It is dangerous because it is empty, because rescue is unlikely, because error compounds quietly, because help is unimaginably far away. And perhaps that is why journeys between planets feel so psychologically challenging. It is not fear of impact that weighs on the mind. It is isolation. The knowledge that you are passing through a region so vast and so indifferent that your existence barely registers. Between Earth and Mars, there is no sense of community, no neighborhood, just you, moving through an expanse that neither helps nor hinders. That simply is. And, when you sit with that thought, it begins to echo something deeper. This emptiness is not hostile in intent. It is neutral. It is not trying to erase us. It simply does not care. And that indifference is perhaps the most honest thing the universe offers. It does not flatter. It does not reassure. It does not promise meaning. Meaning, if it exists, must be brought along, like air in a spacecraft. Yet, despite this, life persists. Against all odds, consciousness has arisen on one small world, and from there, it has begun to reach tentatively into the void. Tiny machines have crossed these empty distances. Signals have been sent, faint and fragile, across the silence, and every one of those journeys is a reminder of just how much space there truly is between one place and another. As you imagine drifting through this interplanetary emptiness, another thought begins to surface. If the space between planets is already so vast and so silent, if it already dwarfs the worlds it separates, then where does the solar system actually end? Where does this quiet domain finally give way to something else? Because the planets, distant as they are still close compared to what lies beyond. And somewhere far past the last familiar world, the sun's influence continues, stretching outward into regions even more remote, where the solar system begins to thin, fade, and quietly merge with the greater darkness beyond. And so the silence carries us farther still, beyond the last familiar orbits, beyond the places where planets parade with names and histories. Because once you have felt the emptiness between worlds, once you have accepted that distance itself is the dominant feature of the solar system, another question inevitably rises, slow and insistent. Where does it end? Where is the edge of this vast, quiet domain we casually call our home? Most of us were taught, gently and understandably, that the solar system ends with the last planet. Neptune, distant and cold, standing as a kind of final sentinel. Beyond it, the story often fades. The diagrams stop. The page runs out of space. And the mind, relieved, accepts that boundary without protest. But the universe, you see, is rarely so tidy. It does not respect the edges of our illustrations. Beyond Neptune, the sun's influence does not simply vanish. Gravity does not draw a neat line and step back. It weakens, yes, slowly and patiently, but it continues. Far beyond the last planet lies a realm where objects still feel the sun's pull, faint though it may be. This region is sparse, dim, and profoundly cold. And yet, it is still part of the solar system, still bound, still quietly orbiting a star that appears now as just another bright point in a crowded sky. Here, in this distant frontier, objects move so slowly that time itself seems stretched. Orbits take not years or centuries, but tens of thousands of years. Motion becomes almost philosophical, unfolding on timescales that dwarf human history. If Earth's entire story were compressed into a single breath, these distant travelers would barely begin their journey. And, when you imagine standing out there, if standing can even be the right word, the sun no longer dominates the sky. It does not warm. It does not command attention. It is simply one star among many, brighter than most, but no longer overwhelming. Day and night lose their meaning. The distinction between warmth and cold collapses into a uniform, penetrating chill. This outer region is not empty in the way interplanetary space feels empty. It is populated but sparsely by remnants of formation, icy bodies, ancient debris left over from the birth of the solar system. They drift in wide, elongated paths, their presence barely detectable except through careful observation and long patience. These objects are not arranged in a tidy ring or shell. They form a vast, diffuse cloud, extending outward in all directions, a kind of halo marking the sun's gravitational reach. And this is where our language strains again. We want an edge, a boundary, a moment where we can say, here, the solar system stops. But nature offers no such courtesy. The outermost regions fade gradually, thinning until the sun's grip becomes so weak that passing stars can tug objects away, reshaping the cloud, stealing pieces of it, returning others. The solar system breathes slowly over millions of years, interacting gently with its galactic environment. Light itself takes an astonishingly long time to cross this distance. From the sun to the farthest reaches of this domain, light travels not minutes or hours, but days, then weeks, then longer still. When sunlight finally reaches these distant objects, it is faint, diluted, almost symbolic, a reminder rather than a force. And yet, even this whisper of light is enough to define membership. These objects belong to the sun, not because they are illuminated, but because they remember its pull. This realization quietly dismantles another comforting idea. We like to imagine the solar system as something compact, something we could draw a circle around. In truth, it is immense beyond intuitive comprehension. Its outer edge, if such a thing can be said to exist at all, lies so far away that the space between the sun and Neptune feels almost intimate by comparison. What once seemed remote now appears merely nearby, and there is something humbling in that progression. Each time we think we have reached the outskirts, the universe reveals another layer of scale, another region where distance expands and meaning shifts. The solar system is not just the place of planets. It is a gravitational territory vast enough to make planets feel like a footnote. And perhaps this is why the idea of an edge is so emotionally loaded. An edge suggests safety, enclosure, a sense of being held. But the solar system is not a shelter in that way. It is an open domain, loosely bound, gradually blending into the wider galaxy. It does not protect so much as it participates. This outer realm also reframes our sense of time. The objects here are ancient beyond reckoning. They formed when the sun itself was young, when the planets were still assembling, colliding, settling. They have changed little since then. They carry a memory of those early days, preserved in cold storage at the fringes of sunlight. In them, the solar system keeps its archive, written not in words, but in orbits. And when we speak of the future, these distant regions matter too. They are reservoirs of potential change. A gentle nudge from a passing star can send one of these objects inward, toward the warmth, toward visibility. Occasionally, one makes the long journey inward, briefly gracing the inner worlds with a faint glow, a reminder that the outskirts are still connected to the center. Standing with this image, you begin to sense the solar system not as a static thing, but as a dynamic, breathing structure. Its inner worlds dance quickly and brightly. Its outer reaches drift slowly and quietly, all of it bound together not by walls, but by influence. And this is the quiet truth. The solar system does not end where it becomes uninteresting. It ends where the sun's ability to hold on finally gives way to the greater pull of the galaxy. It ends not with a line, but with a fade, a gradual surrender of identity. Once you see that, once you allow the solar system to expand in your imagination to its true extent, another perspective naturally emerges. Because if this single star commands such an enormous territory, if its gravitational reach stretches so far into darkness, then what must it be like when we place this entire domain within the much larger structure it belongs to? because beyond this fading edge lies not emptiness, but neighbors, other stars, other systems. And somewhere within that immense spiral of light and dust, our solar system drifts, modest and unremarkable, waiting to be seen not as a universe unto itself, but as a small participant in something far greater still. And so, as the edge of the solar system fades rather than ends, as the sun's gravitational whisper finally loosens its hold, the wider context quietly reveals itself. Because the solar system, vast as it has become in your imagination, is not suspended in isolation. It is moving, drifting, participating in something far larger than itself. It belongs to a structure so immense that even the extended reach of the sun feels suddenly modest. And this is the moment when perspective shifts again, when the frame pulls back and the solar system is no longer the main subject, but a detail. Picture the galaxy not as a flat picture in a book, but as a living system, rotating slowly over hundreds of millions of years, a sprawling disk of stars, dust, and gas threaded with spiral arms that glow softly where new stars are born. Within this rotating city of suns, our solar system occupies no privileged address. It does not sit at the center, where drama might seem inevitable, nor does it cling to the edge, where one might imagine danger or isolation. It resides somewhere in between, one quiet suburb among billions. And, this placement matters, because we humans have a deep instinct to place ourselves at the center of things. It feels natural, it feels meaningful. Ancient stories placed Earth at the heart of the cosmos, surrounded by crystalline spheres. Even today, when we know better, there is a subtle temptation to believe our location must be special in some hidden way. But the galaxy offers no such reassurance. Our position is ordinary, comfortable perhaps, but not distinguished. The solar system orbits the center of the galaxy along with hundreds of billions of other stars. It takes hundreds of millions of years to complete a single journey around that distant core. During all of recorded human history, during the rise and fall of civilizations, during everything we call memory, the solar system has barely begun its current lap. The galaxy does not rush. It turns with a patience that makes human timelines feel fleeting, almost hypothetical. From within the solar system, the galaxy is difficult to perceive. We are embedded in its disk, surrounded by stars in all directions. Dust and gas obscure our view, slicing the sky with dark lanes. From Earth, the galaxy appears as a faint milky band stretching overhead, beautiful but deceptively simple. It gives no hint of its true depth, no immediate sense of how far it extends or how densely populated it truly is. And yet, when you consider scale honestly, the contrast becomes striking. The solar system, even extended to its farthest gravitational influence, is a tiny region within this immense structure. If the galaxy were reduced to the size of a continent, the solar system would be smaller than a grain of sand, resting somewhere on its surface. Not at the center, not marked, just there. This realization can feel unsettling at first. We like stories with clear focal points, heroes, centers, places where things happen. But the galaxy does not organize itself around narrative convenience. It is shaped by gravity, motion, and time. Stars form where conditions allow. They live their lives. They die. Some host planets. Most do not host life, as far as we know. And all of this unfolds without reference to importance or intention, and that's the thing, you see. The galaxy does not know we are here. Our sun is one star among many, unremarkable in mass, age, and composition. It does not blaze especially bright. It does not sit in a rare location. It simply exists, quietly converting hydrogen into helium, warming a handful of worlds by chance. The disk of the galaxy itself is vast. Stars are separated by distances so large that even within this crowded structure, space dominates. The region around our solar system is not dense in any human sense. Neighboring stars are far enough away that their light takes years to reach us. The galaxy is not a packed swarm. It is a delicate lattice, woven from immense distances. Our solar system moves through this lattice, carrying its planets, its distant icy halo, its fragile pocket of life. It does not stand still. Over millions of years, it drifts relative to other stars, passing some, leaving others behind. The night sky slowly changes, though too slowly for any individual human to notice. Constellations are temporary accidents of perspective, dissolving and reforming over cosmic time. There is no central location assigned to Earth, no cosmic marker saying here is where consciousness must arise. Our world is not positioned at a crossroads or a junction. It orbits quietly, carried along by the sun, as the sun itself is carried along by the galaxy. We are passengers on passengers, moving through layers of motion we barely perceive. And, when you allow that thought to settle, something subtle happens. The idea of centrality loses its grip. Meaning shifts away from location and toward experience. The fact that we are not special in placement does not diminish us. It frees us from the burden of cosmic expectation. We do not have to be at the center to matter. We matter because we are here, because we can look outward and ask questions. This galactic perspective also reframes the idea of size yet again. The solar system, which once felt enormous, then hollow, now feels almost microscopic. Its entire extent fits comfortably within a small region of the galactic disk. The sun's gravitational domain is a private bubble within a much larger gravitational field governed by the collective mass of billions of stars. And still, even the galaxy is not the end of the story. But before we rush outward again, it is worth lingering here, because this is the scale at which a new kind of humility emerges. We are not in a unique place. We are not at a cosmic center. We are part of a vast pattern that does not revolve around us, yet somehow includes us. The absence of a privileged position is not a loss. It is a truth, and it is a truth that has quietly shaped modern science. It reminds us that the laws of physics here are likely the same elsewhere, that what happened on Earth could, under the right conditions, happen again, that life is not necessarily a singular miracle, but a possibility woven into the fabric of the galaxy itself. As the solar system drifts through this immense stellar city, it occasionally encounters subtle influences. Passing stars tug gently at its outermost regions. Clouds of gas and dust swirl through the disk. Over long periods, these interactions leave faint signatures, reshaping the distant outskirts of the system. Even in its isolation, the solar system is not entirely alone. It is part of a slow, quiet conversation with its surroundings. And now, as your sense of scale stretches once more, another realization begins to form. If the solar system is just one small participant in this galactic disk, if even here space dominates and stars are widely separated, then what must the distances be between the stars themselves? Because although the galaxy feels crowded compared to interplanetary space, it is still mostly emptiness. And the nearest stellar neighbors, despite sharing this grand structure, remain astonishingly far away. Far enough that even light, the fastest thing we know, takes years to cross the gap. And that realization draws us naturally onward, toward the lonely spaces between stars, where the galaxy reveals just how sparse it truly is. And so the thought carries us outward again, naturally, almost inevitably, because once the solar system has found its modest place within the galaxy, the next veil lifts on its own. We begin to notice not the stars as points of light, but the space between them, the great quiet separations that define the galaxy far more than the stars themselves. From Earth, the night sky looks crowded. Thousands of stars visible to the naked eye. Millions more hinted at in photographs. It feels dense, busy, alive with presence. But this, you see, is another illusion born of perspective. Each star you see, no matter how close it appears to its neighbors, is separated from them by distances so large they defy instinct. Even the nearest star to our sun, the closest possible neighbor in this vast stellar city, is unimaginably far away. If you were to shrink the solar system down to the scale we imagined earlier, with the sun as a small ball in your hand, the nearest star would not be in the next room or even down the street. It would be in another city entirely, perhaps another country, and the space between would be almost entirely empty. This is where the galaxy reveals its true character. It is not a cluster. It is not a crowd. It is a delicate scattering. Stars are not packed together like grains of sand, but spread like islands across a dark ocean. Each star carries its own domain of planets, dust, and distant debris. And between these domains lie vast gulfs, where nothing much happens at all. And, this is deeply counterintuitive. When we look up, our eyes collapse distance. A star, 10 light-years away and one 1,000 light-years away, appear almost the same. They share the same sky. They seem equally accessible, equally present. But in reality, the gap between stars is far greater than the gap between planets. The emptiness that dominates the solar system is only a prelude to the emptiness that dominates the galaxy. Imagine for a moment traveling outward from the sun, leaving behind its fading influence, drifting through interstellar space. The sun becomes just another point of light, indistinguishable from countless others. There is no sense of direction, no signposts, no gradual transition. You do not cross a border that says now you are between stars. You simply find yourself in a region where the nearest significant source of warmth and gravity is years away at the speed of light. In this interstellar space, the density of matter drops even further. A few atoms per cubic centimeter, sometimes less. These atoms drift for years without interacting. They carry no memory of where they came from. They are part of a slow, patient cycle, gathering eventually into clouds, collapsing under gravity, igniting new stars. But most of the time, they simply exist, suspended in darkness. The distances here are so large that even our metaphors strain. We say light years, but the phrase has become almost decorative. We hear it so often that it loses its weight. But a year of light is not a trivial thing. It is not a measure we evolved to feel. It represents time as much as distance. To cross the gap between stars is to step outside any human scale of patience. It is to commit to journeys longer than civilizations have existed. And this is why the galaxy, despite containing hundreds of billions of stars, is still mostly empty. The stars do not interact frequently. They do not brush past one another. Collisions are rare beyond comprehension. Each star follows its own orbit around the galactic center, serenely indifferent to its neighbors, separated by distances that ensure long-term stability. This sparsity is not accidental. It is a consequence of gravity and motion, of balance and time. If stars were closer together, the galaxy would be violent. Gravitational interactions would disrupt planetary systems. Orbits would be unstable. Life, if it arose at all, would struggle to persist. The emptiness between stars is what allows complexity to endure. And, when you sit with that idea, it begins to feel strangely comforting. The vast distances are not a sign of loneliness imposed by the universe. They are a condition that makes longevity possible. They allow stars to live out their lives in relative peace. They allow planets to orbit for billions of years without catastrophic interruption. They create the quiet environments where chemistry can slowly become biology. Yet from a human perspective, these distances feel isolating. We are used to neighbors, to proximity, to the idea that help or contact might be just over the horizon. In the galaxy, there is no such assurance. Even the closest star is so far away that any message sent today would take years to arrive, and years more for a reply. Conversation across the stars is measured not in moments, but in generations. This reality reshapes how we think about the possibility of life elsewhere. If other civilizations exist, and the galaxy is vast enough that it seems plausible, then they too are likely isolated by distance. The galaxy does not encourage easy connection. It allows life to emerge, but it does not make meeting one another simple. Each inhabited world would be like a lighthouse on a distant shore, its light visible, but unreachable. And yet, even here, the mind must resist another illusion. Because although stars are far apart, the galaxy is not uniform. There are regions where stars are more densely packed, and others where they are more isolated. Near the galactic center, distances shrink, interactions become more frequent, radiation increases, stability becomes harder to maintain. Our solar system, in its quiet suburb far from the center, occupies a relatively calm neighborhood. This again reminds us that there is nothing special about us in intention, but perhaps something fortunate in circumstance. Not chosen, not designed, just placed in a region where long-term stability is possible, where stars pass at respectful distances, where catastrophic events are rare enough to allow lifetime to explore itself. As the galaxy turns, stars drift relative to one another. Over millions of years, our nearest neighbors change. The stars we call close today will eventually move on, replaced by others. The night sky is not fixed. It is a slow dance, unfolding over timescales too large for any single observer to witness fully. Constellations are temporary sketches, drawn and erased by motion. And this sense of motion through emptiness carries a subtle emotional weight. We are not static observers in a fixed universe. We are travelers, moving through layers of space and time, carried along by motions we did not choose and cannot stop. The sun orbits the galaxy. The galaxy moves through space, and we ride along on a small world, aware enough to ask where we are going. The distances between stars also mean that when something dramatic happens, it remains local. A star can explode in a supernova, releasing unimaginable energy, and yet the effects fade with distance. Most stars live and die without disturbing their neighbors. The galaxy is resilient because it is sparse. It absorbs events without cascading failure. And this brings us to another quiet realization. If the space between stars is already so immense, if even within a galaxy everything is spread so thin, then the idea of the universe being crowded begins to dissolve entirely. The galaxy itself, vast as it is just one island, and beyond it, there are others, separated by distances that make even interstellar space feel intimate by comparison. As your imagination stretches once more, as the scale expands again, you begin to sense a pattern. At every level, emptiness dominates. Planets are far apart, stars are farther still, and galaxies, too, are separated by vast regions of nothing, where light travels for millions of years without encountering anything at all. The universe seems to build structure not by filling space, but by sparsely decorating it. And that realization, gently unsettling and quietly beautiful, draws us onward yet again. Because if the distance between stars redefines emptiness, then the distance between galaxies redefines it all over again, and somewhere beyond the familiar glow of our own spiral, other galaxies drift through the dark, each a city of stars unto itself, each separated from the others by gulfs so large that even the galaxy begins to feel small. And so the galaxy itself, once it has shrunk in our imagination from an all-embracing universe to a single island of stars, begins to feel unexpectedly lonely. Because when you lift your gaze beyond its faint milky glow, you discover that it is not suspended in a sea of similar structures packed closely together. It is drifting through darkness, accompanied by others, yes, but separated from them by distances so vast that even the emptiness between stars now feels almost intimate by comparison. For a long time, humans believed the galaxy was everything, the totality, the whole stage upon which reality unfolded. It was only when we learned to see faint smudges of light beyond our own stellar disk and to understand what they truly were that the universe expanded again, almost violently, in scale. Each of those smudges was not a cloud within our galaxy, but an entire galaxy of its own. Hundreds of billions of stars bound together, moving as one, just as ours does. And this is where the word distance begins to lose any remaining familiarity. Because the separation between galaxies is not measured in steps, or days, or even in years. It is measured in millions of years of light travel. Light, the fastest thing we know, takes vast stretches of time to cross the spaces between these great islands of matter. When we observe another galaxy, we are not seeing it as it is now, but as it was when that light began its journey, long before modern humans existed, before languages formed, before memory itself took the shape we recognize. If you were to shrink the Milky Way down to something you could hold in your hands, perhaps the size of a coin, then the nearest large galaxy would still not be next to it. It would be far across a room-sized void, and beyond that, others would be scattered sparsely like distant lanterns in a night fog. The universe is not arranged like a cluster of grapes. It is more like a vast plain, with cities separated by long, empty highways where nothing interrupts the darkness. This challenges yet another deeply rooted intuition. We tend to associate size with proximity. We assume that large things must be near one another, that structure implies density. But the universe does not build that way. It builds by separation. Galaxies are massive beyond comprehension, yet they rarely collide. They pass through space largely undisturbed, following the slow choreography set by gravity on the grandest scales. Most of the universe by volume is not inside galaxies at all. It is the space between them. Regions so empty that even the sparse interstellar medium would feel crowded by comparison. In these vast intergalactic voids, a single atom may drift for years without encountering another. There is no warmth, no shelter, no hint of structure, except the faint gravitational pull of distant galaxies shaping the flow of this near-nothingness. And that's the thing, you see. When we imagine the universe, we often picture galaxies filling space like ornaments, decorating an already existing backdrop. But in reality, the backdrop dominates. The galaxies are rare, precious, fleeting concentrations of matter in an otherwise almost perfectly empty expanse. The universe is not full of things. It is full of room. From this perspective, our own galaxy loses any sense of cosmic centrality. It is not a hub, not a focal point. It is one participant in a vast population drifting along with countless others. Some are larger, some smaller, some old and quiet, others actively forming stars in brilliant bursts of light. Each follows its own path through space, influenced by the collective gravity of its neighbors, but never truly crowded by them. Even when galaxies do interact, when they pass close enough to feel one another's presence, the encounter unfolds slowly over hundreds of millions of years. Stars rarely collide. Planetary systems are almost never disturbed directly. Two galaxies can pass through each other like ghosts, their stars weaving between one another, barely aware of the encounter. Space is so vast that even collisions are gentle, stretched-out affairs. This realization reframes our sense of cosmic drama. The universe is not loud. It is not frenetic. It does not rush. Its most spectacular events unfold slowly, quietly, across timescales that make human history feel like a brief flicker. Explosions happen, yes, but even those are isolated moments in a much longer, calmer story. And when you sit with that calmness, a strange serenity can take hold. The universe is not hostile in the way we sometimes imagine. It is indifferent, yes, but also remarkably stable. The vast distances between galaxies prevent chain reactions. They limit the spread of catastrophe. They allow regions of the universe to evolve independently, each with its own history, its own rhythms. From Earth, we can see only a tiny fraction of these galaxies. The night sky hides most of them. Even with powerful telescopes, we glimpse only a thin slice of what exists, limited by the speed of light and the age of the universe. There are galaxies whose light will never reach us, not because it does not exist, but because space itself is expanding, carrying them away faster than light can bridge the gap. This introduces yet another layer of humility. Not only are we not central in location, we are not even central in visibility. The observable universe is not the whole universe. It is merely the part whose light has had time to reach us. Beyond that horizon, more galaxies exist, doing exactly what ours does, forming stars, shaping worlds, entirely beyond our reach. And yet, even within what we can observe, patterns emerge. Galaxies are not scattered completely at random. They form groups, clusters, loose associations bound by gravity. Even here, structure arises not from closeness, but from subtle attraction across enormous distances. Galaxies gather like slow dancers, moving toward one another over billions of years, shaping the universe on its largest scales. Still, between these gatherings lie vast voids, regions where galaxies are rare or absent altogether. These voids dominate the universe by volume. They are the true background, the quiet canvas against which all cosmic structure is painted. If you could remove every galaxy, every star, every planet, the universe would look almost the same. Dark, silent, expansive. And that is perhaps the most difficult idea of all, that the things we care about, the things we name and study and marvel at, occupy almost none of the universe at all. They are exceptions. Beautiful ones, yes, but rare. The universe does not need them to exist as it does. And yet within these rare concentrations of matter, something extraordinary has happened. Matter has become complex enough to ask questions about its surroundings. As you let this sink in, as the galaxy shrinks, further in your mind, another realization waits quietly. Because galaxies themselves, despite their isolation, do not exist alone either. They form patterns on even larger scales. Vast arrangements that stretch across hundreds of millions of light years, where clusters of galaxies trace filaments and walls around immense empty regions. Structures so large that the idea of individual galaxies begins to feel like a detail once again, and so the journey continues. From planets to stars, from stars to galaxies, and now beyond galaxies themselves. Each step reveals that what once felt vast is, in truth, small within a larger context, and ahead lies an even more abstract view of the universe, one where matter forms a kind of cosmic web, threading through darkness, shaping the largest structures that exist at all. And so, once galaxies themselves have become familiar, once they have shifted in your mind from being everything to being merely participants, another layer of structure begins to reveal itself, quietly, almost reluctantly, because galaxies do not float through the universe as solitary wanderers forever. Over immense stretches of time, gravity draws them into relationships. Not close ones, not intimate in any human sense, but vast, slow gatherings that unfold across distances so large they make even intergalactic space feel, well, almost neighborly. When astronomers first began to map the universe beyond our local surroundings, they expected a kind of randomness. Galaxies sprinkled through space like dust motes in sunlight. But that is not what they found. Instead, patterns emerged. Galaxies clustered together, not tightly, but unmistakably. Groups of galaxies bound by their mutual gravity, moving together through the darkness, sharing a long collective fate. These are not crowds. They are communities, stretched thin by scale. Our own galaxy is part of such a gathering, a loose association of galaxies, gently orbiting a common center of mass, drifting together through space for billions of years. Even here, the distances are enormous. The galaxies in this group are separated by millions of light years. And yet, compared to the distances to more remote galaxies, they feel almost close. And, this is where the universe begins to resemble something organic rather than mechanical. These galaxy groups themselves gather into larger structures, clusters containing hundreds or even thousands of galaxies. These clusters are among the most massive objects in the universe, held together not by solidity, but by gravity acting patiently over unimaginable time. Inside them, galaxies move slowly, tracing vast orbits, occasionally interacting, sometimes merging, often simply passing by, their stars rarely noticing. But even clusters are not the end of the story. When we zoom out further still, when we allow our imagination to stretch beyond even these colossal assemblies, a new pattern becomes visible. Clusters are not scattered randomly either. They are arranged along immense filaments, long threads of galaxies stretching across hundreds of millions of light years. These filaments intersect at dense nodes, where clusters reside, and between them lie enormous voids, regions of space almost entirely empty of galaxies. This is the cosmic web, a structure so vast that it defies everyday language. It looks from a distance like a sponge or foam, or a network of glowing strands surrounding vast, dark bubbles. Matter is not evenly distributed. It gathers along these filaments, leaving behind regions of profound emptiness that dominate the volume of the universe. And that's the thing, you see. At the largest scales, the universe does not look like a smooth expanse filled with objects. It looks like a delicate framework, a skeleton of matter outlining immense voids. Galaxies trace these filaments like dew on spider silk, revealing a structure that was shaped by gravity, acting on tiny irregularities present in the earliest moments of cosmic history. These superstructures are not solid. They are not walls you could collide with. They are patterns of probability. Regions where matter is slightly more concentrated, where gravity has had just enough time to draw things together. Over billions of years, these slight differences have grown, slowly, inexorably, sculpting the universe into its present form. The voids between these filaments are among the emptiest places known. Vast regions where galaxies are rare, sometimes absent altogether. In these voids, space expands quietly, almost undisturbed. They are the true background of the universe. If you could stand within one, there would be almost nothing to see in any direction. A few distant galaxies at the edges, faint and remote, marking the boundaries of an enormous cosmic bubble. And when you imagine that, it becomes clear that emptiness is not a secondary feature of the universe. It is the primary one. Matter occupies the exceptions. Structure emerges as a thin network, woven through an otherwise almost perfectly empty expanse. The universe is not built from things filling space. It is built from space itself, gently shaped by gravity into a pattern of presence and absence. This perspective reshapes how we think about scale one more time. Galaxies, once vast, now feel like beads on a string. Clusters become knots, superclusters become intersections, and the solar system, our original point of reference, vanishes almost entirely, lost within a star, lost within a galaxy, lost within a filament that itself is a tiny feature in a cosmic web too large to comprehend fully. And yet, there is something profoundly beautiful about this structure. It is not chaotic. It is not random. It has rhythm. It has geometry. The universe, at its largest scales, exhibits a kind of order that emerges naturally from simple laws applied over immense time. Gravity pulls. Space expands. Matter responds. From these basic ingredients, a cosmic architecture arises. This architecture also tells a story of time. The filaments and voids did not always exist as they do now. Early in the universe, matter was distributed more evenly. Tiny fluctuations, barely noticeable, were amplified as the universe expanded and cooled. Over billions of years, these fluctuations grew into the vast structures we observe today. The cosmic web is a fossil, a record of the universe learning how to arrange itself. And, when you think of it that way, the universe begins to feel less like a static thing and more like a process, a story still unfolding. The filaments continue to draw matter inward. Clusters continue to grow. Galaxies merge and evolve. Voids expand. Nothing is finished. Even now, on timescales far beyond human concern, the large-scale structure of the universe is changing. Within this grand pattern, there is no preferred location, no center, no edge. Every observer, anywhere in the universe, would see a similar web stretching outward in all directions. This is another quiet but profound truth. The universe does not privilege perspective. It does not orient itself around observers. It simply is, unfolding according to laws that apply everywhere equally. And yet, within this impartial vastness, something rare has happened. In one small filament, In one modest galaxy, around one ordinary star, matter has become self-aware. It has begun to trace the structure it inhabits, to map the web, to ask how it came to be. The cosmic web is not just an external structure. It is something we have learned to see, to infer, to understand, despite our infinitesimal size within it. This understanding does not make the universe smaller. It makes it deeper. Each layer of scale reveals another level of complexity, another reason to pause. And as the web stretches across your imagination, as filaments and voids replace stars and planets as the dominant features, a final humbling comparison begins to form. Because even this vast network, even the cosmic web itself, occupies only a portion of what exists. Beyond it lies the observable universe, a sphere defined not by structure, but by time. The distance light has had time to travel since the beginning. And somewhere within that immense volume, the solar system is not just small, it is almost inconceivable. And so, as we prepare to place our tiny corner of space within that ultimate context, one last question lingers, soft but insistent. If we could see the entire observable universe at once, if we could shrink it down to something familiar, where would our solar system fall within it? And what would its size mean then, when compared not to stars or galaxies, but to the universe itself? And so we arrive at a point where even the cosmic web, vast and intricate as it is, begins to feel like a framework rather than the whole picture. Because all of those filaments and voids, all of those clusters and superclusters, exist within a boundary defined not by matter, but by time. This boundary is what we call the observable universe. It is not the entire universe. It is simply the part of it whose light has had enough time to reach us since the beginning of everything we can meaningfully talk about. And this is where scale becomes almost poetic rather than numerical. The observable universe is not something you can point to from the outside. There is no external vantage point. It is a horizon that surrounds every observer, everywhere. Wherever you are, the observable universe centers on you, not because you are special, but because light travels at a finite speed. Beyond a certain distance, the universe may continue, perhaps endlessly, but its signals have not yet arrived. They remain beyond our awareness, not hidden, but delayed. Now imagine, just for a moment, that we could perform one final act of scaling. Suppose we could shrink the entire observable universe down to the size of something familiar. Let us say, perhaps, the size of the Earth itself, a sphere you could walk around, oceans, continents, clouds, all replaced by a vast, smooth globe representing everything we can see, every galaxy, every star, every planet, every atom that has ever influenced us with its light. Where, then, would the solar system be? This is where language falters, because even at this scale, even after all the shrinking we have already done, the solar system does not become something comfortably visible. It becomes almost nothing. If the observable universe were the size of the Earth, the solar system would be far smaller than a grain of sand, smaller than a bacterium. It would be a speck so tiny that even calling it a speck would be generous. It would not register to the naked eye. It would vanish into the texture of the surface. And that's the thing, you see. We often say the solar system is small compared to the universe, but those words do not do justice to the reality. Small suggests something still countable, still locatable. In this comparison, the solar system becomes effectively zero, not metaphorically, practically. Its size is so negligible that it contributes nothing to the overall dimensions. It does not matter where you place it. It does not alter the picture. And within that vanishingly small region lies Earth. And upon that Earth, a thin layer of life. And within that layer, consciousness, thought, memory, the ability to imagine the universe that has rendered us so small. This realization has a peculiar emotional quality. It is not simply humbling. It is disorienting. Because everything that has ever mattered to us, every story, every triumph, every tragedy, every love, every fear, exists within a volume of space that is essentially invisible when compared to the whole. Our entire history occupies a rounding error in the cosmic ledger, and it is tempting at this point to feel diminished, to feel that such smallness implies irrelevance. But that response comes from a misunderstanding. Relevance is not a function of size. Meaning does not scale with volume. The universe does not assign importance by measuring mass or distance. Importance emerges locally, wherever complexity arises. The observable universe contains billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars. But as far as we know, it contains very few places where matter has become aware of itself, places where atoms have assembled into minds capable of asking questions. From that perspective, the solar system is not just small, it is rare. When we place it against the scale of the observable universe, something profound happens to our intuition about existence. The universe does not feel like a place built for us. It feels like a place that did not notice us at all. And yet within it, we have emerged anyway. Not as a goal, not as a destination, but as a possibility realized. The observable universe is vast beyond anything the human mind can fully contain. Light from its most distant regions has been traveling for billions of years, crossing expanding space, carrying information from a time when galaxies were young and stars were just beginning to form. When we look out that far, we are looking back in time, seeing the universe not as it is now, but as it was long before Earth existed. And still, even that enormous sphere is not necessarily all there is. There may be regions beyond it that are forever unreachable. Galaxies whose light will never arrive. Events that will never influence us. Realities that exist, but will remain unknown. The observable universe is not a container. It is a limit imposed by physics and time. Within this limit, the solar system is not central. It is not near an edge. It is simply somewhere. Somewhere ordinary. Somewhere unremarkable in location. And yet, here we are, thinking about the whole. If the universe were scaled down to the size of the Earth, and the solar system were invisible upon it, then humanity would be invisible within that invisibility. Our cities would be unimaginably small. Our bodies would be abstractions. Our lives would occupy a time scale too brief to notice, and yet, within those fleeting moments we manage to reconstruct the history of the cosmos, to map its structure, to infer its origins. That is perhaps the most astonishing contrast of all. The universe is vast, ancient, and indifferent. We are small, brief, and deeply concerned. And somehow, those two facts coexist without contradiction. As we compare the solar system to the observable universe, the idea of scale stops being about measurement and starts being about perspective. The universe does not shrink us. It contextualizes us. It shows us that we are not the center, but it also shows us that centers are not required for meaning to exist. And when you reflect on that long enough, another thought begins to take shape. If our size is almost zero in cosmic terms, then our existence cannot be justified by scale alone. It must be justified by something else, by experience, by awareness, by the simple fact that, in this vast expanse, something is happening here that may be happening in very few places at all. The solar system may be tiny, but within it, chemistry has crossed a threshold. Matter has organized itself into living systems. Those systems have evolved senses, memories, curiosity. They have looked outward and inward and asked why. That does not make the solar system large, but it makes it significant in a way size cannot capture. And so, as we hold this final comparison in mind, as the solar system dissolves into near nothingness against the backdrop of the observable universe, we are left not with despair, but with a question of value. If we are so small, what does that mean for meaning itself? Does smallness imply insignificance? Or does it free us from the burden of cosmic centrality, allowing meaning to arise wherever awareness blooms? This is the quiet transition we are approaching now, moving from scale to significance, from measurement to meaning. Because once we accept just how small we are, the next step is not to shrink away, but to ask what that smallness allows. And in that question lies the beginning of a different kind of understanding, one that has less to do with distance and more to do with existence itself. And so, having allowed the solar system to dissolve into near nothingness against the immensity of the observable universe, a quieter question remains, lingering like an echo. What does it mean to be so small? Not just physically small, but small in duration, in influence, in cosmic presence. Because when scale reaches this extreme, it does something subtle to the mind. It strips away illusions. It removes the idea that size alone confers importance, and in doing so, it invites a deeper kind of reflection. Smallness, in human language, is often a synonym for insignificance. We are taught, almost unconsciously, to equate greatness with scale, with reach, with dominance. Large empires matter. Vast distances impress. Powerful forces command respect. But the universe does not seem to share this value system. It does not reward size with meaning. It does not assign purpose according to mass or volume. Instead, it allows complexity to arise wherever conditions permit, regardless of scale. And that's the thing, you see. The solar system is tiny, yes, but within it, something extraordinary has happened. Atoms have assembled into molecules, molecules into cells, cells into minds capable of memory, imagination, and wonder. From the perspective of sheer size, this is almost absurd. From the perspective of significance, it is profound. Consider how rare this might be. The observable universe contains hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. The numbers are so large they dissolve into abstraction. And yet, as far as we can tell, the number of places where matter has become conscious may be vanishingly small. Perhaps not unique, but certainly uncommon. The universe is vast, but awareness within it may be sparse. This reframes the meaning of smallness entirely. The solar system does not matter because it is large. It matters because within it, the universe has become able to look at itself. Through us, through our instruments, through our questions, the cosmos gains a form of self-awareness, not intentional, not designed, but emergent. And when you think about it that way, smallness becomes almost a prerequisite. Large systems tend to be simple. They average out. They smooth away detail. It is in the small, protected pockets that complexity thrives. It is in quiet corners, far from violence and disruption, that fragile processes can unfold long enough to become intricate. The solar system's modest scale, its calm galactic neighborhood, its long periods of stability, these are not signs of insignificance. They are conditions that allow meaning to arise. The universe does not need us. It would continue expanding, forming stars, shaping galaxies, whether we were here or not. That truth can feel unsettling at first. We like to believe we are necessary. But there is also a kind of freedom in realizing that our existence is not demanded by the cosmos. It is permitted by it, allowed. And that makes it precious in a different way. Because if the universe does not require us, then our value is not imposed from outside. It is something we create. Meaning becomes local. It emerges from relationships, from experiences, from awareness itself. The fact that the universe is indifferent does not negate meaning. It hands responsibility for meaning back to those capable of perceiving it. And this is where the emotional weight of scale begins to transform. The earlier realization of smallness might have felt diminishing. Now it begins to feel grounding. We are freed from cosmic expectation. We are not required to be central or eternal or vast. We are allowed to be brief, allowed to be local, allowed to care deeply about small things. Within the solar system, life has unfolded on a single planet, in a thin layer clinging to its surface. That layer is fragile. It can be disrupted. It has nearly been erased before. And yet, it persists. It adapts. It learns. Over time, it has produced beings capable of understanding their own fragility and still choosing to ask questions about the universe that dwarfs them. This is not a contradiction. It is a harmony. The vastness of the universe does not trivialize life. It contextualizes it. It shows us that life is not inevitable. It is a delicate arrangement, balanced on conditions that could easily have been otherwise. And that rarity gives it weight. There is also a kind of humility that arises naturally from this perspective. If we are small and rare, then certainty becomes harder to justify. Dogma softens, arrogance fades. The universe has existed for billions of years without us. It will likely continue long after we are gone. That does not make our time meaningless. It makes it finite. And finitude sharpens value. And perhaps this is why contemplating cosmic scale so often leads to quiet rather than fear. Once the initial shock passes, there is a sense of calm. The universe is not judging us. It is not demanding explanation. It is simply there. And within it, we have a brief opportunity to be aware. The solar system may be small, but it is sufficient. Sufficient for oceans to form, for chemistry to explore possibilities, for evolution to experiment, for consciousness to arise. It does not need to be larger. It does not need to be central. It only needs to be stable long enough for complexity to unfold. And this has implications for how we see ourselves and one another. If meaning is not granted by scale, then power and size lose their moral authority. Empires fade, stars die, galaxies merge. What endures, at least for a while, are experiences, relationships, acts of understanding. These are not measured in kilometers or light years. They are measured in awareness. From this vantage point, science itself takes on a different tone. It is not a conquest of the universe. It is a conversation with it, a careful listening. We are not mastering the cosmos. We are learning how it works, piece by piece, knowing that our understanding will always be partial, always evolving. And that humility is not weakness. It is strength. It allows us to revise our beliefs, to accept uncertainty, to remain curious. The universe rewards curiosity not with comfort, but with insight. It does not offer meaning ready-made. It offers raw material. As we sit with the idea of smallness, another subtle shift occurs. We stop asking why the universe exists for us and start asking what we can do within the brief moment we are given, how we treat one another, how we care for the fragile world that supports us, how we choose to use the awareness that has emerged here, in this tiny corner of space. And this is where cosmic perspective quietly meets ethics. If life is rare, then it is valuable. If awareness is uncommon, then it carries responsibility. The universe may not care whether we exist, but we can care whether we persist. We can care about preserving the conditions that allow thought, curiosity, and compassion to continue. The solar system's smallness does not absolve us of responsibility. It intensifies it. There is no backup, no nearby refuge, no second Earth waiting just beyond the horizon. Our tiny place is not just insignificant. It is irreplaceable, at least to us. And so, as we move toward the final reflection, having traveled from planets to stars to galaxies to the observable universe and back again to ourselves, a new question emerges. If we are small but meaningful, rare but not central, how should we understand our place? Not in terms of location, but in terms of relationship. How do we live, knowing we are not the center of the universe, yet aware that the universe has, here at least, become capable of reflection? This question does not demand a single answer. It invites an attitude, a way of standing beneath the night sky that blends humility with connection. And it is this attitude, this quiet recalibration of perspective, that draws us gently toward the final step of the journey. A step not outward, but inward, toward a renewed understanding of what it means to be human in a universe that is vast, ancient, and profoundly beautiful. And so we return gently from the farthest reaches of scale back toward ourselves, carrying with us everything we have seen, not as numbers or diagrams, but as a feeling, a quiet recalibration of perspective. Because after planets have vanished into dust, after galaxies have become distant lights, after the observable universe itself has grown so large it dissolves into abstraction, one question remains, steady and human. Where are we in all of this, really? The answer is not where we once thought. We are not at the center. Not physically, not temporally, not cosmically. The universe does not revolve around us. It never did. And yet, that realization, which once might have felt like a loss, now begins to feel like a release. Because to not be at the center is to be free from a certain kind of burden. We are not responsible for holding the universe together. We are not required to justify its existence. We are participants, not anchors. And that's the thing, you see. For a long time, human stories placed us either at the center of creation or at its edge, cast out into insignificance. But the truth revealed by science is more subtle, more generous. We are somewhere in between, not central, not peripheral, simply embedded, part of a vast unfolding process that did not begin with us and will not end with us, but which includes us nonetheless. When you look up at the night sky now, after traveling through these layers of scale, it no longer looks the same. The stars are no longer just lights. They are suns, distant, isolated, surrounded by emptiness. The Milky Way is no longer a backdrop. It is a structure you inhabit, moving through it without noticing, carried along by motions too slow to feel. And the darkness between the stars is no longer a void to be ignored. It is the dominant feature, the medium in which everything exists. This shift in perspective invites a particular kind of humility, not the humility of self-erasure, but the humility of accuracy. We are not more than we are, but we are also not less. We are exactly what we appear to be when viewed honestly. A young species on a small planet, orbiting an ordinary star in a quiet region of a spiral galaxy, in a universe that is vast beyond comprehension. And once you accept that, something curious happens. Anxiety about cosmic importance begins to fade. We no longer need to ask whether we matter to the universe. The universe does not have preferences. It does not bestow meaning. Meaning arises, locally, wherever there is awareness. And we are aware. This awareness connects us, not just to one another, but to everything that preceded us. The atoms in your body were forged in stars that lived and died long before the earth formed. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your thoughts, all were created in cosmic processes that unfolded over billions of years. You are not separate from the universe. You are an expression of it. And that connection is not poetic metaphor. It is literal. You are made of the universe, arranged in a particular way, for a particular moment. The universe is not something out there that you observe. It is something you are participating in, simply by existing. This reframes the question of position entirely. We are not located at a special coordinate. We are located at a special moment. A moment when the universe is old enough for stars to have formed heavy elements, for planets to have assembled, for chemistry to have become complex, for life to have evolved, and for consciousness to have emerged. We are not central in space, but we may be early or late in time. We do not yet know. But we are here now, and that matters. And, this sense of being part of a continuum rather than standing apart from it fosters a different kind of connection. When you see Earth as a small world in a vast universe, divisions between people begin to look fragile, even absurd. Borders are invisible from space. Arguments about ownership and dominance fade against the reality of shared vulnerability. We are all riding the same small planet through an immense, indifferent cosmos. This does not mean human concerns are trivial. On the contrary, because our planet is small, because life is rare, because awareness is fragile, what happens here matters intensely. The universe may not care whether we survive, but we can, and that caring is enough. Looking back at the journey we have taken, from the scale of the solar system to the scale of the observable universe, a pattern emerges. At every step, what once seemed vast became small in a larger context, and yet at every step, something meaningful persisted. Planets gave way to stars, stars to galaxies, galaxies to filaments, filaments to the observable universe. And through all of it, awareness remained anchored to a tiny world. This suggests something important. Meaning does not require cosmic prominence. It does not require size or centrality. It requires perspective. It requires the ability to experience, to reflect, to care. And those capacities do not scale with the universe. They arise wherever conditions allow. And, this realization prepares us for something else. It prepares us to look again, not outward, but inward, and then outward once more, with changed eyes. To see the night sky not as a place where we are lost, but as a place where we belong, even if that belonging is quiet and unacknowledged by the cosmos itself. There is also a kind of courage that emerges from this view. If we are not at the center, then there is no script written for us by the universe, no destiny imposed from above. The future is open. The responsibility for what happens next lies largely with us, with how we treat our planet, with how we treat one another, with how we choose to use the brief window of awareness we have been given. The universe does not promise comfort. It promises consistency. The laws that govern distant galaxies also govern the atoms in your body. The same physics that shapes cosmic voids shapes the chemistry of life. There is a quiet reassurance in that uniformity. We can understand the universe because we are part of it, governed by the same rules. And when you let that sink in, fear of insignificance begins to transform into a sense of participation. We are not watching the universe from the outside. We are inside it, asking questions it has, in a way, prepared us to ask. This perspective also invites patience. Cosmic processes unfold slowly. Change is measured in millions and billions of years. Human lives are brief by comparison. And yet, within those brief lives, understanding can leap forward. Knowledge can accumulate. Compassion can grow. We do not need to last forever to matter. We need only to matter now. As you imagine standing beneath the night sky with this new understanding, perhaps you feel smaller than before, but perhaps you also feel steadier, more grounded, less pressured to be exceptional on a cosmic scale, more focused on being thoughtful, careful, and kind within the small sphere where those qualities can make a difference. And so, having re-examined our place, having let go of the need to be central or special in a grand cosmic sense, we find ourselves in a quieter position. One of humility, yes, but also of connection. We are not alone in the universe in the way we once feared, not because others are nearby, but because we are made of the same fabric as everything else. This is not an ending. It is a pause, a moment of stillness after a long expansion of scale. And in that stillness there is room for reflection, for gratitude, for curiosity about what lies beyond what we can see, and for care about what lies close at hand. Because from this small world, from this unremarkable location, we have managed to glimpse the structure of the cosmos. And having seen how small we are perhaps finally ready to look again at the universe, not with a need to dominate or explain it completely, but with a sense of wonder, patience, and quiet respect, carrying that perspective forward into whatever questions we choose to ask next. And so the journey does not end with a full stop, but with a soft breath out, a moment of stillness after an immense expansion of thought. Because after all the scaling down and pulling back, after watching the solar system fade into near invisibility and humanity dissolve into a brief flicker of awareness, something unexpected remains. A quiet presence. A sense that, despite everything, this smallness is not an ending, but an opening. When you consider the true scale of the universe, something curious happens to time. The rush of daily concerns loosens its grip. Problems that once felt heavy begin to feel lighter, not because they disappear, but because they are placed into a larger context. This is not dismissal. It is perspective. The universe does not tell us that our lives are unimportant. It tells us that they are rare moments of awareness in a vast, mostly silent expanse. And that's the thing, you see. Silence is not emptiness. It is potential. The universe is mostly quiet, mostly dark, mostly still. And within that stillness, here and there, islands of complexity emerge, not loudly, not dramatically, but patiently. The solar system is one such island. Earth is another. Consciousness is another still, layered delicately on top of matter and time. This final reflection is not about adding more scale. It is about letting scale settle, letting it seep into how we think, how we feel, how we look at the night sky when the day is done. Because once you have truly felt how vast everything is, it becomes difficult to see yourself as isolated. Even alone feels different now. Alone does not mean disconnected. It means singular, unrepeatable, distinct. Every human life is a brief arrangement of particles that have traveled for billions of years to be here. Every thought you have is the result of cosmic history expressing itself in a very particular way. The universe did not plan this. It did not intend it. And yet, here it is, happening anyway. And perhaps that is where the deepest wonder lies. Not in the size of the universe, but in the fact that size did not prevent meaning from arising. That vastness did not erase intimacy. That distance did not forbid connection. Instead, meaning emerged locally, quietly, wherever conditions allowed awareness to bloom. When you stand beneath the stars now, knowing what you know, the sky feels different. Not heavier, not colder. If anything, it feels more honest. The stars are far away, yes. The distances are immense, but the light reaching your eyes has crossed those distances to arrive here, now, in this moment. The universe is not distant in time. It is present. You are seeing it as it was, reaching out across space to meet you. This meeting is subtle. It happens without ceremony. Photons strike your retinas. Signals travel through nerves. Patterns form in the brain. And suddenly the universe is being observed, not by an external witness, but by itself, rearranged temporarily into a thinking form. And that realization can change how you carry yourself through the world. If the universe has become conscious here, even briefly, then awareness itself is something to be protected. Not because the universe demands it, but because it is fragile, easily lost, easily silenced. The vast scale we have explored does not ask us to feel small and defeated. It asks us to feel careful, to recognize that life, intelligence, curiosity, kindness, these are not guaranteed features of the cosmos. They are exceptions, beautiful ones, and exceptions are worth tending. As we move forward, as science continues to expand our understanding, new layers of scale will reveal themselves. New mysteries will emerge. Dark energy, dark matter, the origins of space and time themselves. The universe will continue to surprise us, not by becoming simpler, but by becoming deeper. And each time we think we have reached the edge of understanding, we will find another horizon waiting quietly beyond. And that is not a failure. It is an invitation to remain curious without demanding closure. To accept that understanding is always provisional, always unfolding. To find comfort not in final answers, but in the ongoing act of questioning. This perspective can also reshape how we think about progress. Progress is not about conquering the universe or mastering it. It is about learning to live well within it, to align our actions with the reality of our situation. A small, shared planet, finite resources, a narrow window of stability, a brief moment of awareness. From this vantage point, care becomes a cosmic virtue. caring for the planet that supports us, caring for one another within the thin layer of life that exists here, caring for knowledge, for curiosity, for the slow accumulation of understanding that allows future generations to see further than we have. And perhaps that is the quiet gift of contemplating scale. It humbles us, yes, but it also connects us. It reminds us that every human who has ever lived shared this same sky, this same cosmic context, even if they did not know it. And every human who will live will inherit the same universe, vast and indifferent, yet open to understanding. The solar system may be small, Earth may be fragile, humanity may be brief, but within these constraints lies a remarkable freedom. The freedom to ask questions, the freedom to care, the freedom to create meaning where none is imposed. As you drift with these thoughts, perhaps late at night, perhaps with the lights low and the world quiet, you might feel a gentle sense of belonging. Not because the universe knows you, but because you know it, at least a little. And knowing something vast does not make it smaller. It makes you feel more at home within it. And so the journey continues, not outward now, but inward and forward. Carrying this perspective into the way we live, the way we think, the way we look up at the stars and down at the earth beneath our feet. The universe does not need us to understand it, but we need understanding to live wisely within it. There will always be more scale to explore, more distances to imagine, more questions to ask. And that is not exhausting. It is sustaining. Because as long as curiosity endures, as long as awareness persists, the universe will continue, here at least, to be awake. And in that quiet awakening, night after night, thought after thought, the vast silence of the cosmos is met with something equally profound, a listening mind. And so, as everything settles, as the echoes of distance and scale slowly fade into a calm awareness, we find ourselves back where we began, not in location, but in feeling. Because the true scale of the universe does not leave us stranded in awe or lost in abstraction. It leaves us quieter, more attentive, more present within our own small moment of existence. When we first ask how small the solar system really is, it sounds like a technical question, almost playful, a matter of comparison, of numbers, of diagrams stretched and shrunk. But what it quietly becomes is something else entirely, a meditation on proportion, on humility, on the strange and beautiful fact that something so small can still contain oceans, skies, memories, and minds capable of wondering about everything beyond them. The solar system, once imagined as vast and dominant, dissolves gently as we pull back. It becomes a whisper within a galaxy. The galaxy becomes a faint thread in a cosmic web. The web itself fades into the observable universe, and even that turns out to be only a portion of what may exist. At every step, what once felt immense becomes small, and yet at no point does meaning disappear. And that's the thing, you see. Meaning does not thin out with distance. It does not dilute as scale increases. It concentrates. It gathers wherever awareness arises. The universe may be mostly empty, mostly silent, mostly indifferent. But here, on one small world, it has produced something that can reflect on its own vastness. That is not a contradiction. It is a consequence. The silence of the universe is not a rejection. It is a canvas. Against it, every act of understanding stands out sharply. Every question asked, every attempt to know more, is a quiet defiance of entropy, a moment where order and curiosity briefly push back against the tendency toward stillness. As we contemplate the true scale of everything, we are not being asked to feel insignificant. We are being invited to feel precise, to see ourselves as we are, not gods, not dust, but something in between, a fleeting arrangement of matter that has learned to look outward and inward at the same time. This perspective changes how the night sky feels. The stars no longer press down with their enormity. They open up space within us. They remind us that the universe does not rush. that it allows time for things to unfold slowly, that patience is written into its structure. And when you let that patience enter your own thinking, life begins to feel less like a race and more like a passage. A brief walk through a vast landscape where the goal is not to reach the end, but to notice where you are while you are here. The solar system is small, yes, almost vanishingly so. But within it, a planet has learned to hold liquid water for billions of years. Chemistry has danced long enough to become biology. Biology has explored enough possibilities to become consciousness. And consciousness has turned its gaze outward, asking questions that the universe itself does not ask, but allows. That allowance is subtle. It is not permission granted with intent. It is simply the absence of prohibition. The universe does not stop awareness from emerging. It does not guarantee it either. It simply sets the conditions and lets outcomes unfold. And in that unfolding, we find ourselves here, now, alive in a particular moment of cosmic history. A moment when the universe is neither too young nor too old for stars and planets and life. A moment balanced delicately between extremes. A moment that will pass. Knowing this does not make life fragile in a discouraging way. It makes it luminous. It encourages care, attention, gratitude. Not because the universe demands it, but because awareness invites it. As this reflection settles, perhaps you feel a gentle shift, less urgency to be large, less pressure to be permanent, more appreciation for being present, for being one of the few places where the universe has learned to feel itself. And that is not a small thing. The solar system may disappear into insignificance when placed against the universe, but from within it, meaning blooms. Not universal meaning, not absolute meaning, but lived meaning, shared meaning, the kind that matters because it is experienced. And so the journey does not conclude with an answer, but with a posture, a way of standing beneath the stars, shoulders relaxed, eyes open, mind curious, a posture that accepts vastness without surrendering to it, that embraces humility without losing dignity. From this posture, new questions will always arise. Questions about what lies beyond the observable universe, about the nature of time, about the origins of space itself, about whether awareness exists elsewhere, flickering quietly on distant worlds we may never reach. These questions do not threaten us. They accompany us, because the universe does not shrink when we understand it, and we do not shrink when we recognize our place within it. Instead, something subtler happens. Perspective deepens, awe matures, wonder becomes quieter, steadier, more sustainable. And perhaps that is the final gift of understanding scale. Not astonishment alone, but peace. The peace of knowing that you do not need to be central to be connected, that you do not need to be vast to matter, that even in a universe where the solar system nearly disappears, a single conscious moment can still be meaningful. As you drift onward from here, carrying these thoughts with you, the universe remains open, not finished, not explained away, still vast, still mysterious, still mostly silent, but now perhaps a little more familiar, not because it has become smaller, but because you have learned how to stand within it. And somewhere ahead, beyond the questions we have already asked, there are still more layers of scale waiting patiently to be explored, inviting the same curiosity, the same humility, the same quiet sense of belonging whenever you are ready to look again.